Everyone, welcome to Intelligent Automation Live Dialogues presented by Customer Experience Live. Today, we are happy to be joined by our wonderful guest, James Steele. James is the Divisional General Manager of Digital Transformation and Innovation at Mediclinic International. He is a clinically trained specialist, medical imaging, and clinical informatics professional with senior management, health IT consultant, and commercial leadership experience. Welcome, James.
Hey, good afternoon. Nice to talk to you today.
Nice to meet you as well, James. So all the industries that has been, forever changed by the impacts of the global pandemic, arguably healthcare has the most change. With significant advances in technology and methods necessary to support the high demand of access to healthcare and growing digitization of protected health information, the healthcare industry has evolved in novel ways to continue to deliver the same exceptional quality of service. In your experience, how has the role of AI advanced in diagnosis and drug development?
Wow. Okay. Straight in with AI. AI, I find AI in healthcare hugely interesting. AI is not new. It's been around since the 50s, 60s, and of course, machine learning came in the 80s. But the adoption of it in healthcare has been a little bit slower than one would expect, or one would certainly hope. And I think that a lot of that is down to the soft skills, the people skills, and making it something that's tangible and can be adopted by people. But in saying that, I think in the last 10 to 15 years, it's advancing exponentially, really. And if you look at AI fundamentally, it's got the ability to make sense of large amounts of data very quickly and consistently with minimal error. Way better than any human or team of humans can do. And if you take that and then you apply, the digitization that's taken place in healthcare over the kind of 15, 20 years that we've seen, it all adds together. You have digital data from healthcare, we add AI together, and you get this perfect cooking pot of technology that can move forward. So when we look at the two areas that you mentioned, diagnosis and drugs, if we look at diagnosis, as I say, digitization brought more and more data, and we talked to clinicians, and for every clinical decision, there's more and more data than there ever was that these people have to take on board. Labs, radiology, medical history, perhaps even history or information from other organizations. And even if we look at something simple like radiology, CT scanning, in the last 20 years, we've seen advances from single slice CT to 640 slice CT now, and dual energy CT and all these kind of things. So, more and more data, and things that used to take the clinicians, 5 minutes to report a head CT with maybe 50, 60 slices, it can now take 30 minutes or longer. So really, we need AI to step in and help these guys out. And again, if we look at the core ability of AI to analyze great amounts of data very, very quickly and in detail, that's led to great advances, especially in radiology. Things like automatic segmentation of lung, of liver, of anatomy, nodule tracking for cancerous lung cancer detection, these sorts of things, calcium scoring, automatic bone removal, all these things that radiologists traditionally have to do themselves, the AI can now do for them. And then we also look at things like NLP, and we can then start to go through the unstructured data, the report data, and look for key findings, look for patient follow-ups, these sorts of things, and to automate these. And of course, these are hugely important because this is quality. If we can automate patient follow-ups and make sure that they adhere to these, then we're improving the quality in our organization and we're improving quality and outcomes for these patients. If we look at drugs, again, if you look at bringing a new drug to market, it can take a decade of research, and it can take $2, $3, $4 billion to bring it to the market. And nearly 90% of experimental drugs fail during the engineering. So, the cost, the time, and the failure. If we bring AI into the mix and apply that into the generation and the development of drugs, we can help to identify proteins, very easily that could play a role in the disease. AI can sort through the masses of information in these data sets and help to identify, proteins and drugs that are going to be more effective in patient care and treating these pathologies. And in doing so, because it's faster, more efficient, it reduces the cost of the development of these drugs, and it improves the time to market as well. Also, if you look at things like the introduction of robotic processing, the fact that we can now use robotic arms to apply small amounts of drugs into hundreds of thousands of test tubes of a disease to create that a faster, more efficient process. And then we can use AI to analyze the outcome of this and the images from this far faster than we could with a manual, with a team of people doing this by hand. So again, AI, the advances in it when it comes to drug development, the two big things are hopefully reduction in cost and reduction in time to market. You still there? I think we lost you. And you're back.
I'm sorry. The power now, so my Wi-Fi got cut out. So sorry about that. If you can restart from the drug portion, I can just edit it and then it will all be okay.
No worries. Okay, and then if we look at the application and advancement of AI in drugs and drug development, when we look at what it takes to bring a drug to market, there's a decade of research behind every drug, and there's $2, $3, $4 billion of investment to do that as well. And nearly 90% of experimental drugs don't make it to market. So really bringing AI into the mix helps the researchers, the developers to crunch the data, to identify the proteins that can have an impact on these diseases much faster, much more efficiently than if they were doing it manually. We're using the AI to crunch all these numbers. So that's going to allow these researchers to target the proteins and reduce, hopefully, the development time of drugs much shorter than they are currently, and of course the costs as well. And again, just in the process of the drug development, if you look at the advent of robotic processes as well, a robotic arm can drop this drug into hundreds of vials much quicker than a human can. So we can test these drugs more quickly, but also we can use AI to look at the images, look at the results of these interactions with the drug and the disease to identify which is reacting faster, more efficiently, and again, reduce hopefully the cost of these drugs and the time to market. And we can also, retrospectively, we can use AI to crunch the data that we have on existing medicines and existing drugs to look at repurposing these treatments, potentially making them better, more efficiently as diseases and processes change, and bringing things like genetic markers in there as well. So yeah, there's huge amounts that we can do with AI in these fields.
So there is a lot of benefits to come from the application of AI in healthcare, as you've mentioned. And the foundation of AI, the thing that powers AI success in healthcare is obviously data. And as healthcare providers are attempting to stay ahead of the knowledge curve to provide the best care and also take advantage of the opportunities presented by big data and analytics, are there any limitations and challenges that you find on data integration?
There are. Things are definitely improving. So I've been in informatics for nearly 20 years, much longer than I would care to admit. And in the early days, there was big problems. You would have an MRI or a CT scanner that couldn't talk to a printer. But we've had the introduction of standards in healthcare. We've had things like the introduction of DICOM, which has standardized the way that modalities speak to each other, devices speak to things like PACS systems and radiology information systems. So things are definitely improving, and we have things like HL7 as well, which aids with the communication and between systems. And these standards have definitely helped. But of course, it depends on the landscape that you're in as well. If you're in a single hospital or single health system, then having these systems talk to each other is relatively straightforward. But of course, that's kind of like the perfect world scenario. And we don't live in the perfect world. And a lot of organizations are large, they're complex. A lot of, especially private organizations, grow through mergers and acquisitions. So they may have legacy IT systems that they need to talk to each other. Again, they would possibly want to standardize and swap out old systems, but with new facilities and new acquisitions come, the legacy equipment. But again, things are improving in that space as well. We do have some great solutions on the market that allow us to integrate and aggregate data between systems. Even in the region in Abu Dhabi, there's a great project, and the team at Malafi do a fantastic job there about aggregating the data across Abu Dhabi. So there's huge developments and huge movements in that space. The real the challenge, or the next challenge, I would say, when it comes to data, is the nature of it, whether it's structured or unstructured. Because if it's structured data, then we can do something with it. It's very easy to manage. And a good example of that is the DICOM that I spoke about. DICOM has very structured fields. All the information fits into it. If I want to query it, I can do it very easily. Unstructured data is around things like the free text in reports or in clinical indications, or even the pixel data within radiology. And then you have semi-structured, which is where you put the two together when you have a PAC system that has maybe some of the structured data, the demographic data of the patient, and then the image data alongside it. So where we can use AI, and where it plays a part here, is helping us to structure some of this unstructured data. So we can use AI, by combining things like disease classification or diagnostic codes, these sorts of things. By combining that data along with the image data, the pixel data, we can train these systems to identify normal versus abnormal pixel data, and then take the diagnostic code and apply that to it and learn from it to be able to identify what a pneumonia looks like, or what a left lower lobe consolidation looks like, to then create these algorithms that can work alongside radiologists, alongside healthcare professionals, to triage studies and identify pathologies for them early. And then the final element around the big data is when you look at things like analytics, and again, to be really effective, it needs to be structured. So the AI, structuring the unstructured data for us helps in a big way. But when we look at the different sources of analytics that we have within healthcare, this is where it gets really complex. You've got laboratory information systems, you've got finance, billing, you've got radiology, you've got EMRs, and it's getting all these different systems to talk a similar language. And this is where a lot of healthcare organizations are trying to move to. They want to be data-driven. They want to be able to aggregate the data together into one place so that they can make sense of it, but also make sense of what it means to each other. What does billing data mean to scheduling data? Where can I look for improvements? These sorts of things. And that's the next challenge.
So also another part of your expertise is obviously digital health informatics. So can you also share your thoughts on what the role of this in healthcare going to be?
Yeah, so absolutely. Health informatics as a specialty really is fundamental. I mean, we have obviously IT, which plays a huge role in looking after systems, looking after the evolution of IT systems within radiology. Sorry, not radiology, in healthcare. Radiology is a prime example. But specifically the health informatics part of it is very, very fundamental. Everything is moving to digital. We spoke about radiology, but a lot of other ologies are moving or have moved to digital. And data and digital health informatics really underpin this. The innovation and the transformation that's taking place. You spoke about the pandemic at the beginning of the session. And a lot of people talk about COVID having led to an accelerated adoption of digital in healthcare. I would argue that it hasn't. It hasn't led to an acceleration. What it's led to is a catching up. Healthcare has lagged behind a lot of other industries in terms of its adoption of digital. You look at things like shipping or the travel industry. When was the last time you went into a travel shop to book a holiday? You don't. It's all online. And the airline industry is another prime example. At any given day for any given route, airline will overbook the availability of the plane because they know that there's going to be X amount of people who are not going to turn up for that flight. Why are we not doing that in healthcare? we should have the data to allow us to assign a likelihood of a patient not attending for a procedure. And there can be a number of reasons for a patient not attending. They could have a history of turning up late or not attending for procedures. They could have, they could be exhausted. They maybe have had a half a dozen appointments in the last 2 weeks. All of this should allow us to assign a value or a score or an indicator to a patient on their likelihood to attend for that procedure, and then be able to overbook should we want to make sure that we're not missing appointments. I heard something the other day: an appointment missed by you is an appointment missed by two. And I thought that was a really good analogy when it comes to healthcare. So yeah, digital informatics, digital health, to me, it underpins everything that we do in healthcare and everything that we want to do in healthcare. And ultimately, the goal of informatics is about having the right information in the right place at the right time for the right people.
I think it's very interesting, the analogy that you give us of, the airlines and the healthcare industry catching up, because I think it forced people to, get used to it and then get used to moving everything online and digital in the healthcare industry, where else it's already been that way for other industries. So last but not least, can you also share your insights on how digital technologies are empowering clinical imaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if we step away from the machine learning and its ability to analyze data for a moment and really talk about this, where the rubber hits the road, where the AI and digital technologies help the person on the shop floor. When we look at things like acquisition of imaging, there are new advances around the technology there. Bringing in artificial intelligence, embedding it alongside camera technology, visible technology, to help radiographers when it comes to position patients, looking at the rotation of a patient to make sure that you're going to get the best image possible, to reduce the need for repeating that procedure and the radiation dose to that patient. We have AI tools within CT that help to compensate for patient inspiration, patient breathing through a CT sequence being taken, to make sure that the image data is the best it can possibly be. Also for movement artifact, patients in an MR or a CT who perhaps move, there's AI that will compensate for that within the imaging. Metal artifacts, again, in CT can end up with an undiagnostic examination. So there are tools, there are abilities within AI to reduce that artifact and make the best images possible. And all of these are really about reducing the time for examinations to be taken, reducing the likelihood of repeat examinations and the radiation doses to the patients. But if we look at other digital technologies, there's things like telemedicine, and I speak a lot about radiology because it's where I come from. But there's huge advances in telemedicine in all spaces in healthcare. Cardiology is a big one. A huge project in Saudi Arabia over the last couple of years, Project Taji, looking at centralizing cardiology care across their centers of excellence. Teledermatology is a really nice application as well. Using camera technology to take pictures of suspected lesions or moles, to track the changes in these and give an indication as to whether or not these could be cancerous. The list goes on. Clinical decision support, having people remotely giving input into procedures, triaging studies. Reconstructive surgery is another really nice application of digital technology, again using camera technology. Perhaps you've got a patient who's getting facial reconstruction, perhaps after an accident. You can use the photography tools to take a picture and show them what they will look like after the surgery. And this aids in a couple of ways. One, it greatly helps patient consent for the procedure because they've got a better understanding of what they're going to look like at the end of it. But also from a psychological and a state of mind and well-being, it really helps with their healing process. And then you look at things like training and education. I already spoke about telemedicine, but you've got things like telepresence, making these people who are in training feel as though they're in that room, doing a procedure with the specialist. Creation of 3D data sets and virtual reality, and moving into the metaverse and these sorts of cool spaces. But ultimately, it's all about these digital technologies all coming together to support two things in my mind. One is better patient outcomes through the standardization of the care and the increased quality that we can get from that. And then the second is around, better patient and staff experience.
Thank you so much for your amazing insights shared today, James. It was a really interesting conversation, and I cannot wait to see you in our Intelligent Automation show in Dubai in May.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really look forward to meeting the delegates and speaking to everyone. Yeah.
It will be an amazing and knowledgeable experience, I'm sure. Have a wonderful day ahead, James. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.